Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about cranial nerve number 8, and this presentation is by Valerie, Sophia, Jordan, and Mia. So cranial nerve number 8, also known as the vestibular cochlear nerve, has two divisions. There's the cochlear division and the vestibular division. So the cochlear division is responsible for our hearing, so it takes our auditory information collected by the cochlea and it relates it to the brain, which allows us to hear. And for the vestibular division, it's more about balance and spatial orientation. So it helps us know the position of our head, maintaining our posture, and controlling reflexes like the vestibular ocular reflex. And that's where, like, when you move your head, you don't get dizzy because your eyes are going to stay in the same place. Okay, so where is the nucleus for cranial nerve number 8 located? Well, there's a total of 6 nuclei, and it is located in the pontomedullary junction, and that's where the pons and the medulla meet in the brainstem. For the cochlear division, there are 2 cochlear nuclei, the anterior and posterior. And for vestibular division, there are 4 nuclei, the superior, medial, lateral, and inferior vestibular nuclei.
This nerve innervates two branches, the cochlear branch responsible for hearing and the vestibular branch which manages proprioception. The vestibular branch allows for balance, coordination, and fine motor movements without conscious effort or constant visual input. Both branches are sensory. The structure that is innervated by the cochlear branch is the cochlea. This spiral-looking structure converts sound waves into electrical signals that are sent to the brain for interpretation. The vestibular branch innervates multiple structures. The semicircular canal manages head rotation and balance. Both the utricle and saccule manages perceptions of gravity, with the utricle managing horizontal movement, such as moving forward and backward, and the saccule managing vertical movement, like jumping or when we are in an elevator.
When a sound is loud enough to create waves within the fluid-filled cochlea, a flood of neurotransmitters release from the hair cells and depolarize bipolar spiral ganglia. The axons of the spiral ganglia bundled together to form the cochlear branch of the auditory nerve. The cochlear branch enters the skull through the internal auditory meatus and transmits signals to the cochlear nuclei, which are found at the pontomedullary junction. Information from the cochlear nuclei is transmitted via acoustic striae, which either travel upwards from the cochlear nuclei and decussate in synapse at the inferior colliculus, or travel sideways and decussate in synapse at the superior olivary nuclei. Axons protrude from the superior olivary nuclei and travel upwards to synapse first with the lateral lemniscus and then with the inferior colliculus. The inferior colliculus sends the signal upward to the medial geniculate body of the thalamus. The thalamus relays the signals to Heschel's gyrus within the temporal lobe. Finally, sound impulses can travel through the corpus callosum to the opposite hemisphere's auditory cortex as well. Sensory information from the semicircular canals, utricles, and maculae is received by vestibular ganglia, which join to form the vestibular branch of the auditory nerve. The vestibular branch enters the skull via the internal auditory meatus. The vestibular branch then synapses with the nuclei of the pons and the medulla and the flocculonodular lobe of the cerebellum. Tracts originating from the nuclei of the medulla and pons transmit information to the spinal cord, cerebellum, thalamus, and cerebral cortex.
So the 8 cranial nerve has 2 parts. The cochlear part is in charge of hearing, and the vestibular part is in charge of balance. And when this nerve is damaged, the symptoms will depend on whether the damage is in one ear or in both ears. If the damage is unilateral, meaning one ear, then the person will lose hearing on that side. For balance, they might feel vertigo, which is a sensation that the room is spinning or moving even when they are standing still. They can also notice their vision shaking because of an involuntary eye movement called nystagmus. And nystagmus is typically stronger because the brain is getting an unequal signal from the working ear and the non-working ear. Balance can also feel a little off, but usually it's not too severe since the healthy ear is still trying to keep things steady. If the damage is bilateral, meaning both ears are affected, then hearing loss would be present in both ears. Balance becomes much harder to manage now because the brain is not getting good information from either side. And vertigo can still happen, but nystagmus is usually weaker or may not even appear since both sides are equally damaged. Even though the eye movements may not be as noticeable, the overall unsteadiness is much worse. and this can make walking and standing much more challenging and can also greatly increase the risk of fall since both the hearing and balance parts of the nerve are no longer sending reliable signals.